Historically, we first write our software and then we test it. In test-driven development, we do the opposite. We first write some tests, then we write enough code to be able to pass those tests. We refactor to get better quality, and we repeat the cycle until we get the software that we are trying to build. At a high level, as I mentioned, we start out with tests. Those tests obviously fail because we haven't written any software. We write some code that usually leads to another failure because on the first cycle you rarely get it right. Then eventually you get it to pass, you feel good, and you commit this code back to your repository. Now, since we're writing in JavaScript, we're going to be using a framework in JavaScript. As in most things in JavaScript, there are a lot of choices and a lot of frameworks. One of the most widely used is Mocha.js and Chai. And there's a number of ways in where you can write your test. There's not just TDD, what I mentioned, test-driven development, but there's also behavior-driven development. The difference being that one is more friendly to the reader or the human. As you can see here, should says foo should be a string versus, say, an assertion where it says assert type of foo string. And it just is a more natural way to express potentially your test, but this is dependent, of course, on the developer or the software engineer. Now, there's a number of things that we should note about this. At the highest level, the most important ones that we will work with to begin with are describe, which is merely a way of grouping, and you can nest these as much as you need, and I'll give you an example in a moment. And the other one is it, the it function, and this is the test case. So here I'm going to show you a simple test case where, as you can see, it says id should be MIT. Then we define a variable. This is a simple hello world type test, simply so that we can pass this test. And it says school should equal MIT. And obviously this would return as a successful test. Now the test suite, as you can see there, involves the function describe, and you can nest it as much as you want. In this case, I'm trying to illustrate some hierarchy, so I go from Galaxy to Earth to Boston. Now the test inside of this suite is the same one we did before, where we say it should be MIT. We can also have a number of tests inside of the suite, as you can see here, where I'm not just checking the name, that the name of the school should be MIT, I'm also checking that the length is 3. So that's a high level of the fundamentals of what Mocha Chai is and what we're trying to do. Let's now move to a practical example. I've gone ahead and created a repository simply for testing. As you can see here, it's a sample repository. I've called it Blue. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Git address. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. Our very first step is to install Mocha and Chai globally. We do that by entering npm install mocha-g, and you won't see many applications being installed or many packages being installed because I've already done this before. I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for Chai, and you will see something similar. Again, because I've already installed these packages before, you don't see that long list scrolling across the screen. Now, after we do that, we're going to go ahead and move into a folder I've created where I'm creating this application. And inside of it, we're going to create a clone of my repository. So I'm going to enter git clone, and that's the address of the repository. And if we move into the folder that was created, you'll see the files that we saw before. Now, at this point, I'm going to run npm init, which will create a configuration file in JSON. And this will guide me through a number of questions, as you'll see in a minute. A lot of this is simply being read off of the repository. It's also using the directory name as well. So I'm going to go with the defaults. The name will be Blue, version 1.0, description, I will say inspecting Mocha Chai. I don't have an entry point, but I'm going to use the default. The test command will be Mocha, which is the default command to run tests using Mocha. I'm then going to use the default address that's being given to me. I will enter Mocha Chai as keywords. I will enter the MIT license, and when it asks me to confirm, I'll say yes. So now, if we list our files, you'll see there that I have a package.json. If I inspect that file, you'll see that that's that JSON file that we just created. So the very next step now is to install those files, those testing frameworks locally. We do this for two reasons. One, to have all of that code locally. The second one, so that they can be added to the configuration file. So I'm going to add npm install Mocha. In this case, I will add the save option. I'm going to go ahead and run that, and you'll see now that we'll get the full list because we are not going with the global, which is already installed, but we're going with a local copy. I'm going to do the same for Chai and save locally. And now if we inspect the package, the configuration file, you'll see that at the end there are two dependencies, Chai and Mocha. At this point we can go ahead and run the test. It'll fail because we haven't created anything, and so we'll do that next. We'll create a directory, which is the default directory, which is called test. Unless you specify something different, test is the directory which Mocha will look to. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I will then create a test file under the same path, and I'll use the nano editor. I'll go ahead and use test.json, and I'm simply going to say nothing to see here. And go ahead and close, save, and now we have a test file. So if I run Mocha again, we'll see that 0 are passing. We don't really have any tests. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up again, and I'm going to cut and paste a couple of tests that I've created. And as you can see there, they're very basic. I define a variable. These are simply meant to pass. So I am requiring Chai. I create an instance of should as well. I am then defining a variable called Peter, and then I run a couple of tests. The very first one is looking at whether the name is a string, which will be true. And the second one, it's asking if the name is equal to Peter Parker. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Go ahead and confirm and exit. Now I'm going to go ahead and run Mocha again. And as you can see there, I have two tests. One is testing for string, the other one is testing for Peter Parker. If I were to modify those, let me go ahead and change the name here. It's going to check for Peter Parker or Peter Parkey. I'll go ahead and save the file. I'll go ahead and run Mocha again, and you can see that now one is passing and one is failing. So at its barest bones, this is an example of how to set up Mocha Chai testing and run a basic test. With that, I'll go ahead and close and say goodbye.